Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting. It is June 12th, 2023, and it is 6:01. And let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So we're going to start tonight with a presentation. As people that are here, and we were here also, the Board of Selectmen, we had many people from public audience who came to talk about the recent property reval. So we have our experts here, Amy Merriweather, the Finance Director, and Francine Beeland, our Assessor, to do a presentation to address some of the questions and to answer questions also. So I'm going to turn it over to them. I do want to say one thing before, I did want to introduce Lee Erdman. I skipped that part. He is our interim town manager, and so if you haven't met with him before, he's in the corner office, and welcome to Lee.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So as Wendy said, Francine and I were asked to put together a presentation on our most recent revaluation. I'll take you through the presentation that we put together for this evening, and then Francine will be here to answer any technical questions that you have. So we will take you through some of the basics of the revaluation, why we do it, how we do it, some of the specific statistics related to the Simsbury reval, and then how did we compare to our surrounding communities that also went through the reval process. So why do we reval? This is mandated by the state of Connecticut to be done every 5 years. Every 10 years, we have to complete a full revaluation. So every 5 years, it could be a statistical revaluation where we're just focused on updating the market value data. For a revaluation on a full revaluation, there's more of an emphasis on physical inspections. We must track that we have attempted a physical inspection on every property at least one time in 10 years. So for our October 1st, 2022 revaluation, this was a full revaluation for us. The revalue companies that we used two different companies. They both perform residential and commercial revaluations. We chose to use two different firms because one has more of an expertise in commercial properties and then the other one in residential properties. I personally thought this was beneficial when we were going through some of our early hearings from our commercial vendor. I kind of was picking his brain a little bit on what he was seeing on the residential side compared to what our other vendor was seeing on our residential side. So I thought this was helpful. The purpose of the revaluation, so we're equalizing the tax base. Basically, we're reevaluating the market to account for the changes in the fair market value and redistribute the tax base. So for our 2017 reval, the one before this one, we had lower value properties that saw more significant increases, and then our higher value properties saw less significant increases. For the 2022 revaluation, we actually saw the opposite, where some of our higher value properties saw more of an increase than our lower value properties. The revaluations are not conducted to raise revenue, so we're basically doing a reassignment of the tax base. If we had done this outside the budget process, commingling it with the budget process, it's kind of hard to assess how much is coming from the revaluation versus how much is coming from the budget increase. But if we were to do this process outside of the budget process, our property values would be adjusted, the mill rate would be reduced, and then the tax base to the town would remain unchanged. There would just be a redistribution of what property is paying what portion of those taxes. So for our revaluation, all of our properties were valued as of October 1st, 2022. The method of valuation is dictated by our state statutes and guidelines, so there's no subjectivity that's allowed to be used. First, we take all of our property sales that are analyzed from October 1, 2021 through October 1, 2022. We analyze those property sales, and then we analyze our income and expense data for any of our commercial properties. From this data, we determine our pricing models. So the pricing models are created. The residential property is based on sales data, and then our commercial property is based on our income and expense data. After we have our pricing models, those pricing models are tested. They're applied to confirmed sold properties. So they must consistently produce values that closely approximate the sales prices. This is something that is mandated by state statute, and also something that we have to prove to them that we did at the end of the process. And then finally, once we have our data sets that are confirmed, all of those values are used and applied to our non-sale properties. We have 3 valuation models that we use: the cost approach, the sales comparison approach, and then the income capitalization approach. All 3 models are used for income producing properties. The cost approach is used primarily for our commercial properties, and then the sales approach is used for our residential properties. Then we get into the types of appraisals that there are. The fee appraisal, this is one that people are most familiar with. It's typically associated with bank appraisals if you're purchasing a property or refinancing a property. And then we have our mass appraisals, and this is what we use for our revaluation. You can go to the next one, Tom. So this kind of gives you a breakout of the distinction between the 2 different appraisal types. So for the fee appraisal, you're just doing one property at a time. You're also doing it at a unique point in time. There's also adjustments to comparable sales determined for each appraisal, and they can differ depending on the appraiser or the time of the appraisal. So in and of itself, there's subjectivity in these appraisals. And then a single value is produced for a single property. And then lastly, there's no statistical test to prove the accuracy of those appraisals. The mass appraisal, which is done by our revaluation companies, we are appraising multiple properties at one time. The date of appraisal for all of our properties is October 1st, 2022. The equitable appraisals among similar properties is critical. This is something that is mandated by the state statutes, and we will get to the statistics that support this data later on in the slides. There are individual values for each component. So we have values for lands, buildings, outbuildings, and site improvements. And then the statistical tests that are used are proven the accuracy of our appraisals. So the timeline of the revaluation, I won't go through each of these with you, but you have them for future reference if you wanna take a look through. But basically, I just wanted to highlight that the process starts a year in advance of the actual revaluation. So we start going out to RFP in September of 2021, and then the work actually starts commencing in November of 2021. Just on this one, I wanted to highlight that there are 2 opportunities for people or property owners to contest their appraisals. We have the informal hearings that were held with the revaluation companies in December through February. And then if there's still no satisfaction in any results or changes, there is an opportunity to be heard by the Board of Assessment Appeals, and those happened in March and April of 2023. So we have the Board of Assessment Appeals, so this allows our property owners to challenge their assessments.
Oops.
Oh, I think it came out of the paper. Sorry, the Board of Assessment Appeals, this allows our property owners to challenge their assessments. We have 3 elected members of the board that serve a 4-year term. These are all volunteers, not necessarily with any expertise in the field. 3 alternates are appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And then the training provided to be on the BAA is also limited. They are provided a handbook by the town of Simsbury, and then they are also allowed to participate in a 3-hour workshop that's offered once or twice a year, but this is an elective. There's also various assessor classes that happen throughout the year that Francine will go to. They are invited to go to those as well, but again, those are elective. They are not mandated. In 2018, our Board of Assessment Appeals declined to hear any appeals on commercial or apartment properties assessed in excess of $1 million. That would likely result in court action anyways. So this is something that is allowed to be adopted in accordance with state statute, and they did take advantage of this adoption back in February of 2018. So some of our Simsbury data on the Board of Assessment Appeals, we had 159 appeals that were filed. We had 26 of those appeals that resulted in no action. We had 3 of those appeals that resulted in an assessment increase. And then we had 118 of those appeals resulted in assessment decreases. On our commercial properties, we had 62 appeals that were filed. Of that, 38 of those appeals were not heard based on the value and what I mentioned that the Board of Assessment Appeals adopted back in February 2018. 18 appeals resulted in court filings, and 16 of those were over the $1 million threshold. Of the 24 appeals that were heard by the BAA, 18 resulted in no action, and 6 resulted in assessment.
Amy, I'm sorry if you mentioned this already, but what time period, what is the timeline we're talking about here? These statistics are from?
So this would be from March and April when the Board of Assessment Appeals was.
You're talking about the BAA appeal?
Yeah, whatever this right here, this number of commercial property, 62 appeals were filed.
Those are the filings, so the deadline to file was March 20th.
So we're talking about a current, you're not talking about retro to 18, 17, 16, this is today. Okay, thank you. That wasn't clear as to what this was. Thank you.
So this is Simsbury's data in average rounded numbers. Our residential properties saw 30% increases, apartments 58% increases. Our commercial, including apartments, was 20% on average, and then our commercial without apartments was 9%, and then our industrial properties went up 31%. If we look at the next slide, we can see how we compared with those towns around us that also performed a reval for the same time period in 2022. So if you look at the residential column, Simsbury, about 30% increase in residential properties. You can see that Glastonbury came in a little bit lower at 26%, and then Granby and South Windsor came in a little bit higher at 33 and 34%. The commercial properties without the apartments, Simsbury came in at about 9%. It was actually a little bit lower than that. And then Glastonbury 8.5%, and South Windsor 7%. So very much in line with our peers. The commercial analytic with the apartments, we have Simsbury at 20%. Glastonbury did not provide it that way. South Windsor did not provide it that way. But Granby provided it, including apartments, and they were at 37%. And then the last and final category, the industrial, Simsbury came in at 31%. This, as you can see, compared to our peers of Granby and South Windsor, is considerably higher. And this is because Aquarian had added 2 newly built water treatment plants in the current year.
I wonder what the number would be if you excluded them.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we know our assessments are fair? So to validate our assessments, there's 4 primary measurements that are mandated by state statute that we have to report on. So the first one is the level of assessment. So this is essentially our ratio of the appraisal to the market value. And as close to 70% as we can get is the best. So Simsbury reval came in at 67.1%. The next level of data is the coefficient of dispersion. So how far each property ratio is away from the median ratio. The target is below 15% is ideal. Simsbury came in at 6.8%. The price-related differential, this basically measures the uniformity of the property values and determines if there's any bias in our valuations. Number 1 equals a 1.0 equals no bias. Simsbury came in at 1.015. And then our unsold ratio, we're comparing the market of unsold properties before and after revals. So basically, we're comparing the 2017 assessment of unsold properties to the 2022 assessment of unsold properties. The target ratio is between 0.95 and 1.05. Simsbury came in at 1.032. So looking back, what went well during this process? So we had a flyover this year. This is something I thought was really cool. Francine essentially gave the vendors her maps of Simsbury and all of the properties. So then a plane flew overhead and did their own mapping of the properties from the outside. Both of the maps were overlaid one over the other, and then any variances were picked out via red, orange, green. So the red ones were, this is something you really need to look at. So our contracted vendor focused on the red properties, and then internally we are looking through the rest of the discrepancies. The data mailer return process. So typically these are mailed out and then they are mailed back in. For the first time this year, there was an option to go online and report as opposed to sending in the snail mail data mailer. There was some process improvements related to ease of access of scanned documents. We had scanned documents into the system. For example, the data mailers were attached to the property card, streamlining the process and reducing the time spent. And then lastly, accommodations were made for all residents that missed the informal hearing sign up. So this is something I actually want to commend Francine on. The mailers went out to sign up for the informal hearings. On the mailers, it said to contact the vendors to sign up for an informal hearing. Nobody likes to call the vendors, everybody likes to call Francine. So she accommodated all of those requests. If they missed the deadline, she still heard them. And if it was significant enough, actually, you either made the changes yourself or for the residential, or she contacted the reval company to make sure that they were heard, whether they were within the time period, outside the time period, everybody was heard. All right, so like anything else, there's always room for improvement. So here are some areas that we thought we could improve upon. So starting the process sooner, so getting boots on the ground. This is something that has been resolved, unfortunately, as of September 2022. We had hired a new inspector, if you will, that started shortly before October, where the next revout period, this will be a huge improvement on streamlining and timeliness and just kind of starting the process early. The next two on the data entry process and staying current with our building permits, these kind of go hand in hand. Our reval company was doing a lot of the keying and the data entry for us. Of course, with anything data entry related, there is room for human error. Francine would have to spend her time either catching those errors. So now we have a new system between the planning department, building department, and the assessor's office where the systems talk to each other. Francine has been working out the kinks between the two. So hopefully for the next revout process, all of that information will be in our system and it won't have to be keyed by our vendors. A physical review of the field. This is something we did not contract for, but looking back, we probably will contract for during the next process. This is something where a reval company drives through our neighborhoods. They're not looking at individual properties, they're just looking at the neighborhoods, they're looking at the valuations, does their work make sense? So this is something that fell on Francine because we didn't contract for it, and probably something that we would look to have the outside vendor do for the next process. The informal hearing deadlines, there was some talk about this, having them sooner. So the idea is if we are able to improve upon items 1, 2, 3, and 4, that the informal hearing deadlines and the mailing of the notices will be moved up and therefore not within the holiday season. The last item I want to talk about is the income and expense report. So this is something that is done on an annual basis. Francine typically sends out her notices in April, right? Asking that everybody comply with submitting their income and expense reporting. This is something that she does annually. If she does not send out her request for the information. It is not mandated, and there is no penalty for not submitting. So since Francine did not send out the notices because of the reval process and all of the work that came with that, those notices were not sent out. So therefore, for the June 2023 submission, they are not required. We would love to have them, but they're not required, and there will be no penalty for not submitting them. So since Francine is in the practice of sending these notices out annually, typically if during the next reval we find ourselves in the same position, if there's a circumvention to the annual process, we can send out a communication, email blast, a letter notifying that these are not required and that no penalty will be assessed. That's all I got for you.
Do we have questions, follow-up questions from members of the board?
So, Amy, thank you. Relative to the looking back, that list, other than physical field review, correct me if I'm wrong, other than physical field, those are mostly what could have been improved from an experience standpoint, from the interaction with the public, i.e. the property holders in town hall. It's just how the experience went. The physical field review, if I'm interpreting, is the only thing up there that may have ended up in a different initial result. Is that a fair statement? Or would any of these have affected where the assessments landed?
None of them affected where the assessments landed. It added more work to Francine to verify the vendor's work. And had we streamlined some of these processes, then the notices could have gone out sooner, and then we wouldn't have had the assessment notice being delivered during that holiday period.
So we're
Shorter timeline to,
So this is experiential. So again, this reinforces your comfort with the accuracy of the reevaluation. Because I think what people would be looking to see is that if there was an error made, and we can say conclusively that no errors were made in the process to get to the reevaluation. Is that a fair statement?
Not in the process.
Yeah, based on the ratios, that's why we have to report to the state. And that's what we have to, for them to approve where the reval went to be followed, So errors, there could always be errors. We find errors constantly.
Right, but that's errors.
But as far as whole-wide reval.
Exactly. The global, there was not an error done in the way that we approached the reevaluation.
No.
Right. There's obviously errors can be found on individual tasks or individual properties or whichever. But I just want to be very clear, because that's what I think some people are looking for.
There's always improvements to try to.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think Heather had a question.
I actually have two questions. Thank you, Amy. So my first question is looking at the process from start to finish, obviously moving it out of the holiday time is something that, is a good amendment. Are there any other areas within the process that we could look at to make it an easier process for our residents and commercial owners?
Anything, Francine?
It starts by sending more notices, maybe. We tried using the email blast, but maybe we can use that a little bit more earlier on. Mail a postcard to everybody, maybe at the very, very beginning, letting them know. Assume that, the word was out, the town wasn't a readout here, but perhaps mailing actually a postcard early on, maybe a year ahead of time, letting them know that we're going into that process. Would probably be a really good thing.
And
Which I didn't do.
is there anything in, so say you hear from a lot of residents that they felt like they didn't really have enough time to respond and things. Is there any way to elongate any of it, or does all that fall under statutes and?
Well, yeah, statute, yes. However, like if we had our values earlier on and we sent out the notices, November perhaps, we would still have ourselves a guideline. We wouldn't have asked for an extension first of all, so that would have moved everything, off a little bit more, we would still have a timeline for these hearings and preliminary hearings and so on. It probably would have given us a little bit more time. I do have to say again, Amy did mention it, that anybody who called within that time, I made sure they were heard, so.
So just to follow up on that, Heather, so the BAA, after she files the grant list with the state, they have to file a request to be heard by the BAA by March 20th in this case.
Yes.
So that deadline is state statute. So essentially, anything that we can do to move up those informal hearings, which is what we were looking back at for process improvement, that's the thing that we can control and do better in the future.
Okay, okay, great. And then my other question actually is in regards to the BAA. So someone comes with their data and, why they believe that their property, they were assessed too high. Is there a real criteria for that board to follow, or do they just sort of say, oh, we liked them? I mean, like, what's
It's at
the
their
real?
discretion.
Yeah.
But there's no real, like, any guideline for them to follow, it's just total?
So there isn't part of the handbook, but they're not appraisers, they're not, so that's why they don't listen to the properties over $1 million. There's typically more complex nature to those properties, so they don't have the expertise. They're just looking at the data that somebody provides them, going through that handbook, I assume, of, guidelines that they have, and then making the best decision based
Does it
on their
make
discretion.
sense? Does it make sense?
Right.
And there are some, residential properties also, we'll ask them, has the assessor gone in, has there been an inspection done? There were several times that they did come back and have them schedule an inspection before they made their decision. And there was a board member who even came to some of those inspections with me. So if she wanted to learn, what's the process? And then with that data, then they made their decision afterwards. Is there any corrections that needed to be done in the data that we have in our system or not?
It just seems like, is there anything that can be provided to the Board of Appeals to allow them to actually make better judgment or have
We're
more
not saying-
guidance of like, this is,
I wouldn't-
Those workshops are really useful.
okay.
And most members have gone to them. There was one in February, and we made sure that they all went. There was maybe one that couldn't make it.
Okay, so the workshop is really what gives them guidance
Yes,
and
because
understanding.
it's given by certified, assessors that have been in the industry for years. And that's what they do. And they'll answer any questions, we'll give them the statutes, what they can do, what they cannot do, and then rules to follow also, and guidelines. They're provided through the handbook.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to take a liberty and ask a question. The $1 million threshold, is there a separate threshold for residential and commercial?
It's commercial properties, $1
Oh,
million.
only, okay. Did you say that was town induced? Is it a state?
It's a guideline, it used to be 500,000.
Okay.
And the state changed it to $1 million.
Okay,
But that's, the board can determine, ahead of time.
In other words, it's local
Guideline for
option.
us.
It's local option whether or not the board chooses to do that.
and is that like,
It's just,
yeah,
so this board decided to use that route.
Okay.
Because to save them time, to save the taxpayer time, why bring them in if they know they're not gonna be able to do anything? So that's the kind of, the way that they're looking at it. However, there are several commercial properties that were, in the million, over $1 million, that I just let them go. Let them go to the BAA, let them be heard.
Okay.
On other ones that are more complex, based on what their guideline was, we're like, they're not gonna be able to do anything, it's too complicated, so.
do they go to court after the $1 million, for?
Assumed recourse.
Okay.
Notice, and it says that the board chose not to hear them. And their next recourse is to go to court if they.
Yeah, okay.
choose to.
In fact, that's the only recourse, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
we
that's
talked
what
to
I
the
was-
town attorney, there is no local option, so to speak, outside of the court system. The system is designed to go to the court very quickly to resolve these.
So, yeah, so the first recourse is to come to the assessor before anything is finalized, see if there's anything that we can work out. then it's the Board of Assessment Appeals, and then it's Supreme Court.
Can we have other questions? Yeah, Aaron.
How unusual is Simsbury in having a Board of Assessment Appeals? Is it very common for towns that fit our profile? Or are there other mechanisms that towns choose to use? Are there other mechanisms that towns choose to use other than having a Board of Assessment Appeals? Are we very normal in having one?
That is by statute, that's
Okay.
the recourse. Assessors finalize their grant list, any appeals go to the Board of Assessment Appeals, and then after that, court.
Okay.
That's the process.
Are there any other questions?
The only
from
other
here?
new question I had is, given some of the changes you're looking at in the process, is the amount that we're putting aside every year to budget for this process, is that sufficient?
I think
For a revale year, I think we had talked about that. and
We did.
We did put extra in for legal.
Hmm.
And the appeals are based on the last, I wish I was not here, in the last revaluation. They told me it was about the same amount, so it's not a big difference from the last revaluation.
Okay.
Actually, may I ask one more question?
Okay.
Compared the data that you provided us for the residents and commercial properties that appealed and just saw all that data on that one screen of where it landed, how does that compare to our last reval?
The amount of appeals,
Just sort of the number of appeals.
yeah, it was pretty close. It was like 200 and something appeals, and it's about the same amount.
Okay.
Yeah, Jennifer's office went back and forth. It's about the same amount.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, are you
Just
asking
one-
a question?
Just one quick, I mean, again, this is I think my 12th year. This is probably the most in-depth discussion we've ever had on this process. So I appreciate you guys putting this together for us. I know it's not all the answers the business owners were looking for, but at least it sheds some light on what the overall process is. And again, I think we all wish we could do more up here, but it's probably better that we don't, because we're in the same position as the BAA. We have no expertise to decide on what the valuation of these properties ought to be. And sadly, that's what the courts are for, right? And I think we've had more than my fair share of appeals we've had to discuss in executive session and make an agreement on. And I mean, that's essentially how the system is designed, right? So appreciate that you guys brought it up. And again, the town staff has put this together, because again, I've learned a lot tonight, so thank you.
So I'd like to ask Lee, first of all, if anybody wants a copy of the deck, we can make that available to them. I saw you screenshotting.
Yeah.
And then if anybody has follow-up concerns or questions, do we have a process, or are we, I don't know if we will, or do we just, pretty much done? I mean, you guys have enough information. We're not really gonna engage here, but we'll send the deck out, and then you can reach out if there's an issue. Does that sound reasonable?
Wendy, I just wanted to add.
Sure.
That report that we sent to the state, that is also filed with the town clerk's office.
Okay.
It is available as a public document.
Okay,
Appreciate that.
You know, the stats.
great. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're good. Yes.
Presentation slides are already online.
Oh, perfect. I forgot about that. Thanks, Tom. All right, thank you, guys. Thanks, Amy and Francine and everyone for coming. You're welcome to stay. Well, next up, we have public audience. We have Joan Coe, and we will hold you to 5 minutes. And
5 constructive minutes, please.
we're going to work on that later, so we haven't worked on it yet.
Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. Now that the town has an interim town manager, the issues before us have remained the same. As a resident of the town for over 50 years, I've witnessed many changes in government. The taxpayers of the government is similar to the people who own shares in various stocks. The stockholders are allowed to speak at board meetings, as should the residents of Simsbury, without any restrictions on speech. Public audience is an opportunity for the taxpayers to evaluate the government's role and challenge issues that are inconsistent with their values and evaluate the employees that are paid with their tax money. The government is owned by the people in the community, and while the elected officials are representatives of the community, they are chosen by the people. It is the electors who should evaluate the conduct and principles of the elected officials and challenge the judgment and policies inconsistent with their own. When the electors are self-serving with a disregard to the public good, they should not be re-elected. It appears the Democratic Party has policy issues that have divided the town committee. There are woke left-wingers that have tried to take over the party and have divided the town committee. It is alleged that Selectman Eric Wellman will challenge First Selectman Wendy Maxtusis for the position of First Selectman, which places the left-wing party against the moderates. If there is a primary, the Democratic electors of Simsbury will have their choice for representation. The planning department has been dysfunctional under the leadership of George McGregor, with another employee leading the department. The past deputy town planner resigned from the position to return to a past employment, and the recent employee resigned for another job. Presently, the planning department has 3 full-time employees, with the present deputy town planner having previously employed as a code enforcement officer. A recent lawsuit, Delon Gagny in town of Simsbury Commission to the Conservation Commission, alleges that the votes under the guidance of the town planner was illegal. There have been public notices that were incorrect and other structural failures under the direction of the town planner. The business community has been severely impacted, with higher taxes and increased rents impacting their ability to remain in business. Many tax appeals have been filed in lawsuits against the town. It is alleged the town assessor has failed to send out to the business community the tax forms for personal property identification in a timely manner, adding late fees for the filings. The business community is the lifeblood of Simsbury. The community has not been treated in a fair and equitable manner. These increased taxes can determine the viability of the business community. Recently, the town's community farm was given to farmers under the direction of the Agricultural Department. Gifts of Love managed the town farm previously and neglected the farm, leaving damages between $20,000 and $30,000. The town farm is part of the Trust given to the town for the poor of Simsbury under the direction of the Charities Division of the Attorney General's Office. Giving the land to farmers without approval from the Charities Division is a violation of the Trust. The town has neglected to honor the trust over the years. Presently, town attorney Bob DiCrescendo has been assigned to bring the Farms affordable housing under compliance with land records for low and very low income families under the direction of CHFA, the manager of the property. The Farms affordable housing has had a history of lawsuits and actions with a final vote to bring the complex into compliance with the Trust. When will the town attorney remove all the obstacles that have endured over the years and manage a change to the Farms affordable housing into compliance as a legal entity? I would like to report that Sergeant Jason Trumley, the officer terminated by Chief Bolton, has been chosen to become a state trooper to fulfill his life dream of becoming a police officer. After the termination of Sergeant Trumley, the officers voted no confidence in Chief Bolton. Recently, there have been 30,000 views on SCTV on the hearings leading to Sergeant Trumley's termination. The termination of Sergeant Trumley was created by a rumor about officers that Chief Bolton wished would leave the department. Recently, one of those officers, number 1 on the list for promotion to sergeant, and should be chosen for the position. Many months have passed since the consultant chosen to study the scheduling in the police department have been made public. There have been several drafts returned by Chief Bolton, but no final report. When will this report become public? All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at Joan Co., and Facebook. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Joan. Is there anyone else here for public audience?
I would like to make a brief comment, if I can.
Sure.
As a point of order. I would just like to say that, in my experience, I think in the experience of people here on this board, we think very highly and appreciate our town staff who work very hard to do an exemplary job for this town, including our town assessor, George McGregor, our planner, Chief Bolter, who stepped up to be our interim manager. It is disheartening to hear them continually maligned in public audience. I know we do not speak about ongoing current litigation matters, so I'm not going to address anything that is currently under litigation, but I have to say, in my experience, these people have been professionals that really give their all to this community, and people that I speak to on other boards and commissions feel the same way, and I just would like to show our support for our staff.
Thanks for saying that, Amber.
Thank you. And we have an agenda item later. Lee's provided a code of conduct that we're going to discuss for decorum and thing in the meeting room, unless you have public audience. Oh, I didn't know if you were just flagging me down for something.
Oh, she did raise her hand.
Yes.
Sarah Nielsen, Simsbury Main Street Partnership. Welcome, Lee. I just want to be very brief, and I want to say that, again, we came before you a couple of weeks ago with concerns from the property owners about the commercial. And I'd like to clarify and make sure that people understand that we weren't being critical of our Director of Finance or of the or of what's happened. What we do, and I appreciate, and that's a lot of information for us to take in. So I'll just leave you with a couple of comments. The first thing I'll say is, again, I'd be interested to see the full numbers. I know that we talked about the pending lawsuits and the litigation from like the March, April, but I do know people are still filing. The second thing I'll say is I've been doing this job for 21 years. I have never come before you in the 21 years I've been doing this with the millions of dollars of property owners that we had to. So while I appreciate all the data, well, I'll also tell you anecdotally that there is a problem. And we can say that it's, that it wasn't arbitrary, but there is a problem, because what I can tell you is that we've never had this kind of outpouring. We've never had the percentages that we've had. And so I'd be interested to see, what were the number of lawsuits filed, before current day? How does that compare, for example, to a full reevaluation 10 years ago? How does that compare to 5 years ago? I know there's a lot of talk about mixing, you did numbers between residential and commercial, but we're obviously, the commercial piece is a completely separate animal. And so, we're going to have some questions, I think, after the deck about the commercial piece, if that's fair. And then just a suggestion, I know that there were some good suggestions on how to improve the process. I would suggest that we also reach out to the property owners, because I do think that they might have some valid suggestions as well to improve the process. They are the recipients of this. And so, again, we could say that this was happening, this was happening, this was happening. But a lot of my property owners don't have email addresses. So, I like to see communication between the property owners and the town on how they feel that we can improve the process as well.
That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Before I do the first selectmen's report, I'd like to ask for a motion to amend the agenda, because I don't want to forget, to include item F under selectmen action, which is an update on the hazard mitigation assistance grant.
So moved.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Done. First selectmen's report, I was going to welcome Lee, so welcome Lee again. He's going to be working with us, obviously, and help us in the executive search, working with GovHR as we search for a new town manager. And I also want to thank Chief Nick Bolter again for the month of May that he provided us with. We're going to send out congratulations to the class of 2023 who are graduating. Is it raining or is it not raining? Okay,
What's
good.
going on?
Okay, good. Happy for all of them to have the summer. Hopefully some have it off. And looking forward to college in the fall. I want to congratulate the newly sworn in officers that we went to the PAC for, was it last Thursday? We swore in, they were sworn in by Town Clerk Trish Monroe, and we welcomed officers Jeremiah Kenny, Christopher Sheehan, and also the Animal Control Officer Deborah Clark. The Board of Selectmen places public safety as a priority, and we are proud to have all of them on board. They'll be a great addition to our community, and we thank you for your commitment to our community. We received the Silver Bike Friendly Community Award at the end of May, the League of American Bicyclists. A lot of the work was done by Adam Kessler in the engineering department, so thank you, Adam, along with the bike advocates. And I feel that this really complements the work that our board has been doing and the priority we have placed on the multi-use trails and the current expansions that are going on across the town and the state, actually. I believe it's Accessible Parking Month. Is that true, Amber?
Yes.
Okay, good. June is Accessible Parking Month, and this means that everyone should be aware of handicap and accessible parking spaces. Those lanes are super important for people with a walker or wheelchair. Just make sure you're parking correctly. And then Juneteenth, this Saturday, there's a big celebration in Simsbury at the PAC. The DEI Council is heading this up, and they've invited Avon, Canton, and Farmington. I included the flyer in here, but there's a whole afternoon of events, and Simsbury, Avon, Canton, and Farmington will have a booth, so you can kind of meet people from the community. Happy Father's Day on Sunday. And thank you to the Flower Bridge people for the lovely Burgers on the Bridge last week. It was really fun, and it was a nice night, although, oops, I guess that was the timer. It wasn't as smoky as we thought it might be. Also, some of us volunteered at the Grange Fair, so that was an interesting thing. I got to do jams, jellies, chutneys with one of the local chefs, so it was super easy to have somebody that knew what they were talking about helping me vote. The duck race, we can brag about winning. Was that the first time that we've won that? Yes.
Yes,
So
we
thank
capsized
you.
the previous year, so this was a major improvement.
I came in second the year last year. Yeah.
So I really want to thank the Askham family for the award-winning.
All Eleanor.
Okay,
It's all Eleanor.
award-winning design.
Just broke the balloons.
And we've awarded her with the lovely trophy, but we do have the duck in my office. And I believe that's it. Just anybody heading out on vacation, have a safe trip. And I'm sure I'll see you around town this summer because there's a lot of stuff going on. So with that, I will turn it over to our town manager for the town manager's report.
Thank you very much, Wendy. I will be brief. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to serve the town of Simsbury. I'm really excited to be here, and I think we can accomplish a lot in a relatively short period of time that I'll be here. My first 8 days have been very busy. I've been able to do one-on-ones with all of you, and I appreciate that very much, your candor and your knowledge. I've done one-on-ones with most of the department heads. Hope to complete those this week. I had my first leadership team meeting, which was, I think, very good. We've gotten out our first agenda, and thanks to Tom Fitzgerald for tremendous help on that. He's a whiz. He's a keeper. We've done a draft MOU with Main Street. That was a team effort, got a lot of input on that, and we look forward to discussing that further, moving that forward. And I think for maybe the first time in the town's history, and as I indicated in my interview with all of you, I like the idea of laying out options and alternatives for your consideration. And we've done that with this latest communication to you concerning the FEMA grant. We've laid out some options and a way to proceed, and we look forward to discussing that. You have the department news and notes, which I'll just highlight. In Culture, Parks, and Recreation, the Simsbury Farm pools are now open for the 2023 summer season. Summer camp season begins on Monday, June 19th, next Monday. That's the date of my wife's and my anniversary. It's like 53 years or something.
Wow.
The renovation of the playground at Simsbury Farms will begin later this week, and we're looking forward to a fall installation of the new playground. The Simsbury Recreation Department, in partnership with Simsbury Social Services, will be hosting the popular last day of school Fun Fest at the Simsbury Farms rink on Thursday, June 15th, from 1 to 4:30 p.m. Simsbury Culture, Parks, and Recreation Department is excited to host a truck event at Simsbury Farms on Saturday, June 17th from 9 to 11. A couple of highlights from Public Works. Very successful Household Hazardous Waste Collection Day was held this past Saturday. Second of 3 collections that are held annually in conjunction with the towns of Avon, Canton, Farmington, Granbury, and Suffield. It was very well attended with some 833 households participating. Next collection will be held on Saturday, October 7th, 2023. And finally, Public Works is very excited to report that 4 new employees have come on board since the last Board of Selectmen meeting. Buildings and Grounds Division, 2 new employees, Matthew Dorito, part-time weekend custodian, and Brad Sinkovic, something like that, building custodian 2. And in the Highway Division, David Hyde and Jose Lopez, new truck drivers, with 2 more truck drivers slated to start on June 21st. And that's my report.
Okay, very good. So next up, we go through the Selectmen liaison and subcommittee reports. And I'll start with Heather, and we'll move down the line this way.
Okay, great. For the library, the Friends of the Simsbury Public Library are accepting book donations on Tuesday and Fridays from 10 a.m. to 12, and those donations go towards their annual book sale. So that's one of their big events. Additionally, then for planning, the POCD draft update is on the Simsbury website, and there will be a meeting for residents June 27th from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Simsbury Public Library. They'll be looking for input and feedback from our residents.
Oh,
That's all.
how about you?
Public safety's coming up, so I'll have a report next time.
Okay, great. Amber?
A couple of things. One, I would like to mention, last week we had our Pride flag raising event here at Town Hall, and after that event was the intergenerational drag queen bingo event at Eno Hall, which was a huge success. There was over 100 people there, ranging from 8 months old to I think in their 90s, and it was wonderful, and it was just a wonderful community gathering. And I think that the social services department would like to take a look at doing perhaps more intergenerational events like that at Eno Hall going forward. So that would be a wonderful add to our community. And then speaking of intergenerational events, there is also going to be a hot dog cookout and make your own tie-dye pillowcase on Thursday, June 22nd over lunch, 11:30 to 1:30, and it's on the lawn at Eno Hall. It is free. You just need to register by June 19th. And all the supplies for the tie-dyeing will be provided. You just bring a t-shirt.
Okay, good to know. Eric?
Right, thank you for mentioning the DEI Council's event this Saturday. Just to add a little more detail, there will be a couple of food trucks, but people are invited to bring their own picnics, including adult beverages if you choose. And I think I said it's from 12 to 4. Just a huge thank you to the Simsbury DEI Council and for this group for helping to support this effort financially.
Chris?
Just a couple of random notes, not necessarily things that I'm a liaison to, but I thought were kind of interesting. First of all, there's been, whether it was mentioned at the last meeting or not, but Stephen Petrina is retiring as the high school principal. And that's something that's sort of close to me personally, because I had Mr. Petrina in 1987. I think it was his 3rd year in the job as a social studies teacher. And Sean, you probably had him at some point.
I avoided that class. I got it.
But he's had a phenomenal impact on Simsbury. And one of the most things that's also equally exciting is that our new high school principal, Maggie Seidel, is
She's phenomenal.
is a rock star.
Well deserved.
Yeah.
And it just continues the theme of strong female leadership in this town, and it's really exciting, I think, on that. And I think the town is really excited about Maggie. But I'm gonna miss Steve. For selfishly, for both Selectman Getz and I just want a little shout out to U14 boys lacrosse and U12 boys lacrosse, Connecticut Valley State champions yesterday. So that's another thing for Simsbury that we look forward to. And I ran into. We were at their social services this morning, and tomorrow is Cheese Day, and I was talking about how Cheese Day was going, and Kristen was telling me I said, well, how are donations doing? And she said, this town continues to respond above and beyond to the point where the food pantry is now being stored. Food is being stored in the pews at the church, and that there's so much food and stuff. And people are responding because that's the kind of community we have. But she did say, please put a shout out that the home goods or whichever. We still need more of those. There's a shortage of those. So your basic supplies.
Cleaning
Yes.
supplies, household
Correct.
supplies.
Yes.
Right.
So I wanted to mention that, take the opportunity. But thank you.
Sure. Okay, so now we can move into selectmen action. We have a couple easier ones, and then we have some more detailed items. But we have the tax refund requests, and Lee, we just asked for the motion effective June 12th, 2023, to approve the presented tax refunds in the amount of $2,499.68, and to authorize interim town manager Lee Erdman to execute the tax refunds.
Move that.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The next item up is an annual grant for the Dial-A-Ride. And I'm just going to read the motion unless there's anything that needs to be added here. I don't see Kristen here. And so move effective June 12th, 2023 to accept the fiscal year 23-24 grant funds from the Connecticut Department of Transportation to support our enhanced Dial-A-Ride program and authorize interim town manager Lee Erdman to execute all documents related to the grant award.
Move that.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Are we voting? Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Thank you. So the next item is the abatement and permitting fee waiver request for 100 Gristmill Road from Ensign Bickford. And I was going to turn this over to the town manager or the,
Sure, I'd be
if
happy.
you'd like to summarize some of the numbers and what's going on here.
Yes, first of all, I would like to apologize and thank Amber for having caught an error in the chart of the abatement. The chart was based on estimated information prior to the revaluation. And Amber did my job for me. I should have checked those numbers myself. I did not. So we have an updated chart at your place that shows what the abatement amount will be based on the revaluation. So in summary, the new growth amount is $654,029. The abatement amount is $548,163. So the net growth in taxes we will get over the 10 years is $105,866. New growth in personal property remains the same, $91,390. So the net real and personal property tax we will receive over the 10-year period of the abatement is $197,256. My understanding is the town has granted abatements like this in the past, most recently in 2019. I think the only other thing I would add is that the Business Development Incentive Committee did meet on the 24th of May to review and discuss the request, and they did vote to approve the abatement request and the fee waiver request as well.
Okay.
I'll just,
Happy to answer any questions.
I serve on that committee, and I can just add that the vote, it was approved by the committee. It was not unanimous. But this is incredibly similar to what we approved in 2019. And I think it's important for people to understand that this is a reduction on taxes of the incremental new revenue we're getting. So this is not a loss of existing tax revenue today.
I also would like to point out with a business like this in Simsbury, there's a lot of job creation there, and there's a lot of spending in our community. At lunchtime, dry cleaners choosing to live here, and I think that goes into granting this as well.
Yeah, I would just pile on. I was in favor of the first one, and I'm certainly in favor of this. I mean, the employees of EBAD, I think, have been a phenomenal addition to the community, and EBAD as an employer has been a phenomenal partner for us. And again, I know there are folks that disagree philosophically with tax abatements, but I think, again, as Heather pointed out, folks live in the community, they spend in the community, they grow up in the, they bring their families to this. And I don't think we can properly calculate the net benefit to the town, which I suspect is far greater than this loss here. And again, we're only approving technically, and I appreciate that the schedule is articulate, but we're only approving the percentage of abatement, right? Because we don't know what the actual taxes are in the out years.
Right.
So we're not actually deferring, depending on what what our own grand list does, what our own tax rate does, these numbers will float. But so to save us all the consternation of the, and it's great that you calculated them, but all we're looking at tonight is 100%, 100%, 95, 90, 85, 70. I mean, I wish we could just cut the rest of these numbers off, but that's all we're approving.
But it does give us a good ballpark. It should be a guidepost, right? Not a, as to what the impact is. that we're granting. And I guess the thing I would like to add is that this tax abatement program for improvements like this, I mean, this is available to any business.
It is.
I mean, so this, even though EBAD is a business that has received an abatement in the past, I mean, this is open and encouraging any business to make, improvements to their properties and create jobs.
Okay. Would somebody just point out to me exactly what the decrease or loss tax revenue is based? Is it this number or this number?
548 minus the 197.
Okay. That's what I was trying to calculate. Okay, thank you. And then I saw the fee waiver, permit fee waiver amount in here, which is around 17,000. Is that what it close to?
That's the one we were talking about for about 3 years.
17,780.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the one where Eric and I swear we already agreed to that at a previous meeting, but yeah, here it is.
Okay. And the number was correct, right, Amber? I'm just making sure. It's a joke.
Was that phase contingent though, Sean? Maybe?
No, it's just, we made him come back through the process for some reason for the waiver, but anyway.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for a motion effective June 12th, 2023 to approve the tax abatement agreement for 100 Gristmill Road and authorize interim town manager Lee Erdman to execute the agreement subject to final review and approval of the agreement by the town attorney, and further move to approve the fee waiver request from EBAD.
I move that.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, okay. So now we move into the fiscal.
Are you sweating?
The fiscal year 23-24 non-union compensation. This has been, it came to personnel in May 11th, and it came to personnel last week. And I ask anybody who wants a lot of details on the questions that were raised. The minutes are in here, but there was a lot of conversation that went on questioning some of the salaries that are included in the chart and, discussion and information that we asked to provide so that we had things to base the results on and the voting on. I'd like to see if anyone has questions that they'd like to raise here. I've had all my questions raised, so I'd like to give others an opportunity who are not on personnel, and we can weigh in and have Lee or Tom help us. Heather?
Yes, I have some questions.
Sure.
So to me, it doesn't look like it's a 2.4% across for everyone. The library director position, for one, stuck out because it's quite a large increase.
Just
Is it
correct.
11,000?
There's corrections for 3 positions? Total?
Let's let her. Yeah.
Well, it's two positions for actual salary increases
Yeah,
above the GWI.
right.
That's the
Yeah.
library director and the police chief. My understanding is the recommendation is based on the market analysis. So that we're recommending raising the minimums and maximums of those two positions to a higher degree because of the market, what's happening in the market with our comparison communities. We have a standard set of comparison communities that we monitor each year for this. And then we're further recommending that the people in those positions essentially be maintained at the maximum. So that's why the increases for the two of them are greater than the 2.4%.
So why is it recommended to maintain at the maximum? Because when you look at the other towns in the comparison, not a single one has them at the maximum. They're always in the
Well,
middle of the range.
Again, it's based on the market analysis, which again was based on current year data. So all of the comparison data is based on what is occurring in the current fiscal year. So there will be further adjustments in all of those communities for fiscal year 23-24. So if they use minimums and maximums, as many of them do, those ranges will be adjusted, and then the salaries will be adjusted as well.
So what we're comparing, so for instance, when it says the average income, for instance, for library directors,
Yes.
114. So we fall well above that. And then median, 118. We fall well above that. But what you're saying is that average is going to change and we're the first ones to make the adjustment?
Well,
I don't know that we're the first ones, but if you look at that middle column for
Yeah.
the library director, the maximum, the average of the maximum is 137. And then the average of the actual salaries for the current year is 114. Right, so the library director is currently making more than the average, $6,784 more. And then when you look at the median is 118. So in the current fiscal year, our library director is making $2,787 more than the median. But if you look at the mins and the maxes, our library director is 14,000 behind in the maximum. When you look at the median, you look at the average, 16,000 behind.
That's in the range.
Yeah.
Yes, in the range, that is correct.
so let me jump in to simplify the math a little bit. So look at the maximum, Heather, 137. Multiply by 1.024, you get 140. That's what basically, give or take, that's what the new maximum is going to be
Okay.
for our surrounding communities. So we're actually going to pay less than the average maximum for all of the communities.
Right, so what I'm
it goes
saying is
up.
these are going to go up in the next couple
They're-
of months for the other.
Because
they're
they're not 7-1s. They're six.
Right.
They're
That is
7-1s 22
Okay.
is our salary collection data. So what we tried to do is preemptively. Some of us agreed to preemptively move the library director up to more align with closer to the maximum of the average of those positions, commensurate with what our library offers, the second best library in the state behind Darien, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there was some discussion around
Yes.
purely market size.
I was going to weigh in, Heather, because
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, I just want to point out, though, I
Yeah.
value our library and, having been served on that board, and I think Lisa does a great job. I just was purely looking at numbers and
No, it's a fair question.
increases and saying, how come the majority of our department heads are getting 2.4%, and then someone gets a 10%, and
This is
I
considered.
asked, so I was going to I don't know if you watched the personnel meeting, but I did ask that question because everyone, it was 2.4%. And I did not see in the numbers that the actuals rose to the level of the 132. And this is just numbers, not personnel people. And I did not see that in the actuals. I can see the range being higher, but it doesn't automatically say you stick to the maximum range, right? So I originally wasn't going to vote for that, but when Amber raised points about the library, from the merits of the library, I did ask Eric Gomes because I wasn't going to vote for it based on that because I didn't see the market value in the chart. That he also weighed in that as this was developed, there was some performance/merit factors that may play into the salary adjustment. I asked to have that noted so that it wasn't just market range, because this just said market range and salary, and it said market range somewhere else. So if we could see the market range that showed the 132, then I said I would be fine with that. But I voted for it because of the conversation we had in the meeting.
but when you look at performance and merit, then is that done for other department heads?
Well, that's a question. That's a good question.
I have looked at this since our meeting also, and I think that based on the market, the maximum amount range for the market, it shows that the median is 135 and the average is 137, and we adjusted our maximum up to be 132,906. That's a market rate adjustment. Almost every other department head in our town is paid at the top end of the market. And I think that we are demonstrating a consistent practice of doing that. And so this is a market rate adjustment for the library director. I think that you have to be careful when you talk about merit. I don't think I'm not supporting this based on the merits of our director's performance. I believe she's an outstanding director, but I don't think we need to base it on merit. I think part of what we were trying to do was, maybe some of my comments in the meeting had to do more with, like, we were talking about the size of our library, the size of the program compared to, let's say, the other libraries and comparable communities, and saying that we think our library overall is perhaps more robust, has won more awards, and justifies, paying our director at the top end of that market range. So I see this as if the 132,906 is based on the analysis of the maximum range, then this salary that's being proposed is within that market adjustment, and it aligns with paying almost every other department head at the maximum end of their ranges. And I think it can be supported based on that.
So when we pay at the maximum, then it doesn't leave room for improvement. Do you just always,
We just
each
up the
year,
maximum, yeah.
you change the maximum?
This is the fifth or
and
sixth
then-
time we've had to change the police chief's maximum.
I asked that question.
At least this is normal. I don't know if you guys have all done it. I've probably done 25 department head corrections in my tenure. This is generally speaking how we do them. So this is not inconsistent with past practice, but but yeah, you're right. Literally, because we had a whole separate study for the police when we had a deputy, or when we had, what was he? He was Captain Bolter before he was Chief Bolter. So we had to do a captain study and fix him. We had to do an Angberson study at least 2 or 3 times, fix him, because we were always having to chase the maximum.
Well, I did ask that question. Oh, today. I'm sorry.
No, so I'm just saying, if we're not in line, wouldn't you adjust our maximum? But then, so say you're staying at the 132, why do we choose to keep that as our maximum? Why would you have 132 and then so there's room for future?
We can change it. The problem.
I was just curious.
The problem is we always base the maxes off our opinion of the market, right?
Yes.
Because we don't want to then all of a sudden put a new, which is what we're afraid of, and I think where you were starting to go is we don't want to create an arbitrary maximum.
Right.
So these are the market-driven data with our interpretation of scope and zone of control and importance of position, not merit-based, of what we ask our department heads to do, and that's how we set our maximums. So you're right, but that would require a study, and in Lee's former life, I think you would do that for us, or could do that, where we have a consultant come in and you spend a bunch of time really drilling in so that you have space to grow. Right.
Let me just add to that, if I may, that I understand the town managers in the past have asked for funding for a full classification study, which would be a good thing for the town when you as a board decide that funding is available. Because sometimes inequities creep in, and periodically a study like that can be very helpful, because it'll review all the current job descriptions, the pay ranges, how we go about doing things, and rationalize and equalize things for the future. So it would be a good thing to do in the future. The system we have is the system we have at the present time. It could use improvement. The town manager does review the performance of every department head every year, and I've reviewed all of the performance reviews conducted on the current department heads by the most recent town manager, and based on those performance reviews, the town has an outstanding staff of department heads. There's no question about that. Personally, I like the idea of having a performance component, performance/merit component formally of the system, We don't have that now. Hopefully that can be considered at some point in the future.
To be clear, we've offered that to both the former first selectwoman and the town manager. We approved the 2.4, but we have offered the ability to distribute it how they see fit.
Oh,
So no one has ever taken us up on it.
oh, okay, that's good to know.
So the 2.4 is just an average of all of them and how they pan out. It's not a
No, the 2.4 is
not
not
the
up.
2.4%.
The 2.4 is what we settled most of our union contracts
Yeah.
at. So we generally
We try to
generally
keep it
pay
in
our-
line with what is the
So
other.
then how often do we have kind of anomalies in the equation?
almost every year.
Well,
It's when there's turnover, it's when there's changes. I mean, usually that's when you find out when you got to hire. We've gotten surprised a couple of times.
Okay,
yeah,
And again, I've done at least 15 or 20 of these.
okay.
Sometimes I did one when I landed from a plane once. We had to do one on an emergency basis. But most of them are a little bit more scripted.
Okay. No, I appreciate it. It's, I know I have a lot of questions, but
No, they're
it's
good.
just,
They're
we've,
They're good questions.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob.
hey,
We're not, but I was gonna say, I asked Lee the question about why do we change the salary range every year based on the thing, right? It's a broader salary range, and I think you said that's something that we could consider going forward.
yeah, certainly, it's not set in stone whether you do it annually or every other year or every 3 years. But, certainly in a time period like we're in now, where you have high inflation and you have a lot of competition for the best people, our goal is to retain the great people we have,
Yeah.
and when we need to attract additional people. And so to stay current with what's going in the market is a good thing in this environment.
Yeah.
Not, it's not necessarily good in every environment to do it annually, but for the environment we're in now, it is good.
and this is all budgeted for in our
Yes, it's
budget.
all in
Gotcha.
the approved 23-24 budget, that is
Okay.
correct.
Perfect. Okay.
So I do got to ask, so I do support this 100%. My only question is, you snuck in a memo, the external comparison. So if we approve the 2.4, we're actually behind comparables right now? Is that what I'm reading correctly here? Because it says that the current negotiated salary settlements are actually 2.56.
Yes, yeah.
So generally speaking, we've done this in arrears, but we've never had that, or I've never known that data when we've had this conversation to be
Oh.
more current.
Oh, interesting.
Usually it's because we look backwards. You're shaking your head yes, right? Because that's what we do.
So the 2.4 is picked when doing budget preparation back in January.
Yeah.
And at the time, that data was showing that 2.4 range. Every month, CCM puts out a data report on the state, and it's slowly been creeping up. And the most recent one in May was the 2.56.
So if we were going to endeavor to keep our employees, our unaffiliated employees, current with current negotiated contract trends, 2.56 would be closer to what the state is seeing.
That's the average across the state.
Yes, that is correct.
Can I add one thing to that, though? Does that factor in benefits and, things like that?
None of these
As
do.
far as, so just salary, so we don't know,
Generally.
None of these
we
do.
could be doing better or worse than other towns as far as the package that
But
we
it's
offer.
the same arbitrary comparison. The 2.4 is that number. That's it. So
Okay.
it's just a different point in time. That number is now matured by 6 months, is all the difference is. So my only point is do we just freshen it up to 2.56 because that's in line with the same comparison from when we started this 6 months ago?
And a total compensation comparison would be a worthwhile thing to do at some point.
But that's a study, right, with a consultant.
Yes.
That's expensive.
Yeah.
We'd spend more than the difference between 2.4 and 2.56 on that study.
Well, we could probably do it in-house in terms of looking at our comparison communities at some point. What benefits does each town offer? What's the value of those benefits, et cetera? Not anything that needs to be done right now, but it's something that we could do for you at some point in the future.
I would imagine between us and our comp and benefits consultant, they could do it too.
Yes, yes,
Put it on them.
yes, absolutely.
Run it
Okay,
with closing the DB plan and leaving it open.
So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve a 2.4 general wage increase for unaffiliated staff in a non-probationary status effective July 1st, 2023, pending a satisfactory annual performance evaluation. Further move to approve 2.4 general wage increase for unaffiliated staff in a probationary status upon successful completion of their probationary period, and further move to adjust the salary ranges for non-union classifications as presented that are
I'll
not
make
the
that.
2.4.
I'll
I'll make that with an amendment, the 2.4 to 2.56 instead for both placeholders. That would be my amended motion that I'd make.
I second that.
What's the number value?
Not much, right? I mean, multiply the chart by,
Pretty
it's
small number.
a couple $1,000, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay,
it would be a
that makes
small
sense.
number.
yeah, I support that.
To me, I mean, our intent is to even out our unaffiliated staff at a point in time.
Okay, the votes are
And if
there.
we have the
Let's go.
number, we might as well use the refresh number.
You already seconded.
Okay, so
Votes are there.
any
Let's-
further discussion? I'm going to just say I'm going to stick with the 2.4 because that's what was budgeted, and it was done in line with the union salaries, which is kind of how we've been following that from year to year. So
I agree with Wendy.
All those in favor say aye.
Well, wait, which one did we?
Hold on.
Well,
Which
he-
one?
he
I made the
amended my motion.
The motion's
Okay.
256.
So all those in favor of the amended motion say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Nay. The motion carries, so we'll have to.
No, it fails.
No,
Wait,
it fails.
didn't you
Fails.
guys vote?
Did you
for that?
vote for it or against it, Heather?
I voted against.
Oh, you
I'm sticking
did? I'm
with the
sorry.
2-4.
So
Oh, I'm
3-3.
sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay, so
3-3
thank you.
tie.
I heard you. Okay, so it failed. So we're 2.4.
No, you have to.
No, you
do-
gotta make a motion.
Oh, okay. Move to approve a 2.4 general wage increase for unaffiliated staff in a non-probationary status effective July 1st, 2023, pending a satisfactory annual performance evaluation. Further move to approve a 2.4 general wage increase for unaffiliated staff in a probationary status upon successful completion of their probationary period, and further move to adjust the salary ranges for non-union classifications as presented. Can I have a motion for that? A second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So everyone, no nays. Okay, so that passed, the 2.4.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the help with that one. We can move on now to the next item, which was the Board of Selectmen Rules of Procedure. This was asked for by some members of the board to bring to tonight's discussion. I will say that Lee had already sent out the code of conduct for meetings that he draft that we were going to discuss, which is pretty much in line with this discussion. So somebody would like to
Yeah, I can provide a little context.
provide your context?
Sure. So first, thank you for adding it to the agenda. I understand that, I was aware that there is a project, but the timeline, I believe, is for the next board, for this to take effect with the next board. And I just wanted to see if there would be support about moving this project up, because I think that we have an opportunity now to make sure that our rules of procedure are aligned with and supporting the kind of culture we want for our meetings and more broadly in town hall. And I don't think that this is a hard lift. What I'd suggest is we do a small work group with a couple of members to put a proposal together in collaboration with staff, and then bring it back to this group for feedback. So I would raise my hand to serve on that group.
What, if I can ask, what sort of changes are you looking for? Because the 5 minutes, I believe, is one of the items.
Yeah.
And that's kind of embedded in the code/ordinance. This is what would change that, correct?
Yeah, so I think looking at how we maintain decorum and looking at public participation and the length of that would all be, what I'd be interested in looking at, among other things.
When you say the amendment of the 5 minutes for residents to speak?
Yeah.
Amending that? To
Right, that's
elongate
in our
it or
rules of
shorten it?
procedure.
Right.
I think that, so I'm not in favor of more than 5 minutes.
Can I jump in and save you?
No,
Go ahead.
let me finish this. I think that there are creative ways that we can do this and allow people, sufficient time to speak, but it doesn't necessarily have to be at the beginning of every meeting. Sean, what were you going to say?
So you're proposing that instead of us doing what we're doing right here, we do it on a subcommittee and bring it back to save us all going back and forth right here.
Yeah.
So I would just, yeah.
And in the end, how do we not go back and forth here? Because if
Because
there
we
are
then
two people
we-
on the committee and then it comes and
Because we
the
send
rest
you-
of us say that's not the idea.
Because like with the personnel subcommittee, we send you a draft, you have a chance to review and opine, and then we can expedite the conversation versus us free-forming random ideas up here with no general consensus on where we're gonna go.
So if I can add a couple things, there's one thing that I thought Lee could help us with is looking at our meeting agenda, the way it flows. And this is also a conversation I had had with Maria prior to her leaving about having the public audience at the very beginning try to limit it to agenda items and town business, and then you're allowed to have a second public audience at the end of the meeting where the people who don't talk about the agenda have to wait through the whole meeting. So that could push that and set the tenor of our meetings till later in the meeting. And so that was kind of the conversation that, I was looking for his help on. Another thing that I would say on this is, I don't, given also the code of conduct that Lee has provided here, which he can explain, I guess since it's attached to this, I'd be interested in hearing, how this would work. But I personally think that, we followed this, every 2 years thing, and that's how it was left at the last one. I think with the number of meetings that we have left, I would have to ask if the town has resources to do this, because we already have a pending work group for the smoking ordinance that has not happened. And if we're going to put this ahead of it, that's been sitting there since September. So priority-wise, to me, that is a top priority, which we voted on September. And this would come second, in my opinion.
Which is
So,
fine, right, which is why
agree.
we do a subcommittee, because I would volunteer to help Eric, because we would do the drafting ourselves. These are our rules. We set these however we see fit at our organizational meeting. Town staff doesn't set our rules, we do. So we could set our own, bring them here, and if you guys want to reject them, that's fine, but it would be Eric and I doing the work. And they could be passed on to the next board if they wanted to consider it as well.
I would just add that I believe we have the staff capacity to support a subcommittee, and particularly in the area of if you are interested in looking at your rules of procedure that are adopted by some of our comparison communities.
Yeah, that would be
We can
good.
collect them, we can synthesize them,
That'd be
review
great.
them with you, so something like that would not be a heavy lift for us.
Okay.
And there's still room for the smoking ordinance work group as well?
Yes, I believe there is.
That has a priority, as long as that's a higher priority,
Yes.
since it was already a priority.
Yes.
And the town can handle both.
It's town can handle both, I'm important.
I agree, Wendy, for pressing that. Good.
Thank you.
And we will gather, as part of the work group, we will gather input from any board member who has ideas.
Hey, you and Sean can't wait, can you? Let's
can.
go. Okay.
Well, I mean,
Go on. All right, move on.
Are we going to talk about the code of
Volunteering.
conduct too? Or,
If you'd like.
I just wanted to
Well, let's
address
finish, can we
this.
finish or is it germane to the conversation of forming this work group?
Little germane. So, well,
I'll make the motion and then we can have discussion.
Well,
I will move to form a work group with myself and Sean Askham to put a proposal together to revise our Board of Selectmen rules of procedure.
second,
is there further discussion?
no.
Okay.
Rules of
Well, I guess
procedure.
my question would be, is the meeting code of conduct going to be considered in the work group as part of
don't know. That's
revising
what I was
our?
saying.
Could be, so now it's
Rules?
discussion, so let Lee do his explanation.
Well, I would say that it certainly could be. And based on information I received in my one-on-one interviews with some of you and with some of the department heads, it was apparent to me that there have been some issues related to conduct of some members of the public that come before you. So I asked staff to check what is out there, what do other communities do. Staff very quickly came up with 3 examples of the types of codes of conduct that are out there. I reviewed them. I picked this one as one that I thought would be worth presenting to you, and laid it out for the town of Simsbury and sent it to you. I think it could be incorporated or not, as you choose, but it's one way to go. And to me, it fits within the rubric or framework of accountability, right? Even our citizens should be held accountable for their behavior. And if you have something like this that every citizen has to review and essentially sign off on when they submit the topic, their name, their address, the topic they want to speak on, it's right before them.
That's awesome.
In this case, polite. It's pretty self-evident. So
I think I think they're almost one and the same. So I'd like the both of you to consider both of them
Right.
in one, okay? Because they are symbiotic.
Okay. Okay, did you want to make the motion?
I made the motion.
Okay.
I made the second.
Oh, we second, we were in discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries. Phew, okay, next up is the update on the hazard mitigation. We have Tom Roy, Adam Kessler here to,
Project ever gonna end?
I feel Tom, you're gonna love this one tonight.
Do we have to
Yeah, that's a good
retract the
one.
name of it too? Is that one of the options?
No, and Adam's going to be here, kind of fill in some of the blanks. Adam, unfortunately, was here in his previous stint before leaving us and coming back. He was in some of the early stages of this project. It goes all the way back to 2015. In 2015, we applied for the hazard mitigation grant with a value of just under $42,000. We accepted the grant in 2017. As you all know, we built a beautiful park that sees a lot of activity. This entire process, even though it was a FEMA grant, was run through Connecticut Department of Homeland Security. That's where all of our communication has been. Throughout the process, we've been very transparent that our intention was to buy that property, knock down the house, and build a park. In doing so, we took away a flood-prone residential house, clearing the way within the floodplain, and made some improvements to, there was a deteriorated wooden wall partially holding up that slope. Through the process, we went through National Park Service. They reviewed it. They were acceptable to the project. We went through our own inland wetlands process. They were acceptable to the project. And at the time, our floodplain manager, Mike Lydon, who's actually a certified floodplain manager, also reviewed this and found this all to be acceptable. Recently, in June, FEMA, as part of the closeout process, found out that we built a park there. They felt that they had never been made aware of that. There is some very insignificant construction which was done within the floodway, which includes the split rail fencing, the pavers, and the walkway down to Hop Brook to launch kayaks and such.
Paver like the stones on the ground, right?
Stones on the ground.
Okay.
That's correct.
the nice pad.
This is where this gets very frustrating. FEMA is looking to essentially check a box to say that there's a certificate of no proof that all of this minimal de minimis work within that floodway will not cause the river during a flooding event to rise any higher than it would have beforehand. The computer model and the computer assessments that do this are not detailed enough to pick up these minute changes. The way they would do this is we would send surveyors out to take cross sections along the riverbank over the course of thousands of feet to have various cross sections to depict in a computer model how the water would flow through that reach of the river. There's corresponding roughness coefficients for whether you're going over grass, whether it's earth, whether it's gravel or pavement. We don't believe the models are even accurate enough to pick up the pavers versus grass. It would only be a small strip of this entire cross-section. We initially sent FEMA a letter, or Connecticut Demis a letter, in hopes that it would reach FEMA, basically saying, he gave us a $42,000 grant. We've done everything the way we were supposed to do it. To ask for a study which could cost in the range of $60,000 makes no sense. It's not a good use of taxpayer dollars. It's not a good use of the program. Unfortunately, FEMA has dug their heels in, and even though if we had not applied for the grant, we believe this would have all been done without any FEMA review. They now feel they have been made aware of this work which has been conducted in the floodway. They basically have told us our options are remove the pavers, that section of the walk and the fencing, and or give the money back, or to do this $60,000 study. We have a meeting scheduled then with them for later this month. We're hoping that they're going to see, I guess, essentially the errors in the way, the fact that these models do not depict this level of accuracy. I've said, in terms of being reasonable, if we had to remove the lower section of the walkway down to Hopbrook and replace it with gravel, that's reasonable. The fencing, we're able to do an engineering response, which is we can say, when we see flood waters coming, we will take down the fence.
You sure that's possible to take out those 4-pound split rails?
To push,
Okay.
yep,
All right.
exactly.
Just want to make sure.
But at the same time, I'll be honest, I kind of dug my heels in and I said to remove the pavers is just getting to the point of ridiculous.
They're rocks,
It's not going to change the course of the mighty Farmington River.
which has rocks in it, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Is this complicated because of the wild and scenic designation, or is that totally unrelated?
Because the
In fact,
federal government is
part of the wild and
stupid.
scenic designation, the entire project was reviewed by National Park Service, and they sent us a letter in support of it.
Actually, the river has no rocks in it right now. It's so low.
So is this,
Yeah. It's just
is this like an
sand.
intern at FEMA that's just like kicking their heels, or what's going on
I'll be
here?
honest, Adam was on the call the other day. It was shocking the amount of very high-level
Yeah.
people involved in this who were digging their heels in. And I think part of the problem, as Adam and I discussed later, is there may be the fact that none of them were technical people. None of them were engineers that are saying, this model cannot predict the difference on this.
So, okay, so just for, my mind's getting exploded. So this is just informational tonight because we really need to wait for you to have your meeting.
That is exactly right.
Talk some sense into these people.
That's our recommendation.
Okay,
Give us a
thank you.
little more time to work with them. Hopefully they come around. If not, we'll be back and talk about those other alternatives.
Thanks
Thank you.
for bringing this to us quickly.
Yeah, I like all things, this is probably one of the most frustrating things that we've seen in terms of just, it's not, there's no value to this. And it's not that we haven't tried to explain it, we're trying to work with them. And both Adam and I are very hopeful that we can find a reasonable solution to this. We've also engaged the consultant that helped us with our, all of our work when we were doing the park, same thing. As much as they would love to collect this fee, they're saying it's not going to give you a valuable result. So,
One more question. So if we do have to pay back the $41,978, we would approve that, it would go to the Board of Finance if we had to do that?
it gets even more complicated because if we simply give back the money, FEMA is still arguing.
We're still
they
arguing.
still know it's there,
But
and they
the-
would still be pushing to
So
have
you're gonna
small
like the
items.
point of my question though. Can we pay them back in pennies? It's 4,198,100 pennies. Why not? I mean, if they're gonna be petulant, why can't we? I mean, this is ridiculous. This is all the wrong with state government and federal, and is our congresswoman involved?
Congresswoman has been notified, and both our state senator and state representative were on the call.
I mean, this is a federal issue, right? So we really need Congresswoman Hayes to fix this.
And one of the many options that
Should.
both Adam and I are exploring is to potentially look a little bit farther into seeing if we can find an independent expert potentially to write that letter to FEMA to say, this will not provide valuable data.
So we're basically saying, let's do the meeting and then come back.
We're saying, let's do the meeting, but we want to make sure everybody here is aware.
Yes, good.
And if you haven't felt it, both Adam and I are going to dig in our heels and fight. This is,
All right.
Thank you.
We have investment on it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
that was a great guy.
Okay, that's not as painful as I thought. So next up, we have resignations and appointments. Thank you, guys, to various boards and commissions. So if the board accepts the resignation and appointments, the following motions are in order. I may want to make sure I have the corrected one. Move retroactive to May 30th to accept the resignation of Kevin Gray as a regular member of the Zoning Commission. Move retroactive to June 6th to accept the resignation of Susan Rubenstein as a regular member of the Library Board of Trustees. Move effective June 12th to appoint Tony Braz as a regular member of the Zoning Commission. Move effective June 12th to appoint Dave Moore as a regular member of the Public Building Committee. Move effective June 12th, 2023 to appoint Pradeep Bajaj as a regular member of the Simsbury Housing Authority. That's why I'm reading all of these, because you're here. Move effective June 12th to appoint Rachel Hayes as a regular member of the Simsbury Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. Move effective June 12th to appoint May Knight as a regular member for the Student Council I'm having trouble reading tonight, student representative to the Simsbury Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. Move effective June 12th to appoint Michael Schulitz as a regular member of the Simsbury Sustainability Committee with a term ending December 4th.
Move that.
Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
I would,
Hey, pretty.
I'd just like to quickly say, in recognition also of Kevin Gray, who has
time.
served for so
Long
many
time.
years on zoning and also 37 years at the Simsbury Historical Society,
Yep.
and he will be retiring to Maine. So we are sad to see Kevin leave our community, but we wish him well in his retirement.
Yeah, same. He's a neighbor, so he's been with us for a long time, so we wish him good luck. Any comments or questions on the minutes? None? So I look for a motion to move into executive session with Attorney Dee Crescenzo and Lee Erdman. Are you staying for that too? Sure. Tom Fitzgerald and the full board.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, get out.
Get while the getting
Pretty.
good.